Dalit communities. So this is our in this today's session. The speaker is from Chhattisgarh, Guru Ghasidas Vishwavidyalaya. The speaker name is Dr. Aishwarya Mehta, who is a research scholar at the Department of English and Modern European Languages, having expertise in the realm of gastropolitics in Dalit culture or Dalit communities in particular, and Jewish and other marginal communities in general. So, Aishwarya Mehta has delivered various lectures in different platforms and presented a number of papers related to food cultures and the problem of caste related to food and all. She has been actively engaged in academic researches dealing with gastropolitics in India and South Asia in larger scale. So, with this note, I welcome you all to congratulate Aishwarya Mehta for this session and make this session very successful. Thank you all. This session is over to you, Aishwarya Mehta ji.
Thank you so much, sir, for this generous introduction. It is truly a pleasure to be a part of this lecture series and to have the opportunity to engage with everyone present today. I'm grateful to the organizers for the invitation and look forward to sharing my thoughts on food and culture. So, without further ado, I'll start with my presentation. So, please grant me the permission to share my screen.
I request Professor Gopani ji to please make this Aishwarya Mehta to access this PPT and all, and so that she can share PPT. Now the permission is granted, Mehta.
Yes, sir. I just got the permission. My PPT is visible to all.
Yeah, very visible. Go ahead,
Okay.
please.
So the topic for my today's talk would be our archives on taste, memory, and resistance, the lit food culture in India. A narrative lecture, to be very precise, because I'm not taking on much of the things. There is a lot more to discuss than what I'm going to discuss today. So, for the briefing, I would say that today's lecture invites us to rethink food not merely as a taste, cuisine, or consumption, but as a powerful social text that preserves hidden histories in India. Food has never been existed outside the structure of caste, labor, dignity, and exclusion. What people ate, who cooked, who was allowed to share meal, and whose food was stigmatized were all deeply a political question. This lecture focuses on Dalit food culture as a living archive. By archives, we do not mean only books, museums of official records. We also mean kitchens, utensils, inherited recipes, gestures of cooking, memories of hunger, practice of survival passed from one generation to another. Through these everyday forms, communities preserve histories that mainstream institutions often ignored. When we study Dalit food practices, we are not simply studying meals. We are studying memory, trauma, labor, ecological intelligence, resilience, and resistance as well. Food becomes evidence of how oppression entered daily life, but also how communities transform scarcity into knowledge and dignity. Through today's discussion, I hope we explore how food records hierarchy, how it stores emotion and collective memory, and how documenting these traditions today become an act of reclaiming voices and history. So, here we can see that I talk about the food as a regulated social system. As it explores how food in India has historically functioned not only as a nourishment but also as a structure, social institution shaped by caste hierarchies. Food is often understood through cuisine, festival, taste, and hospitality. Yet in India, the act of eating has long been conducted with idea of purity and pollution, privilege and deprivation, inclusion and exclusion. Food therefore becomes a social language through which power operates. For Dalit communities, food was never simply a matter of free choice. Access to land, water sources, kitchens, temples, markets, and even shared dining spaces was often restricted. These meant that hunger itself became a political move, which is pretty much what we all have known for a while. We have books like Bhimayana, where we get to know how Ambedkar talks about the five elements, the Panch Tattvas, and he has basically written a complete graphic novel, which has segregation of air, water, fire, earth, depicting how all these elements are for the Dalit communities. The dominant image of Indian cuisines usually celebrate vegetarianism, ritual purity, and refinement. However, such narratives have ignored the communities who cultivated land, cleaned spaces, handled labor, and survived under oppression. Thus, food becomes an archive of hierarchy. It records who had abundance, who had scarcity, and who had the authority to define what counted as acceptable food. Dalit food as a living archive, we get to know that Dalit food culture should be understood as a living archive. Normally, when we hear the word archive, we think of documents, museums, libraries, or written records. But many marginalized communities preserve their histories through everyday life rather than institutionalization. Dalit food archives survive in cooking practices passed across the generation, gestures learned in kitchen, memory preserved through taste and smell, methods of survival developed under scarcity, oral traditions rather than scripted or written recipes. A family recipe may prefer famine memory, a cooking technique may preserve labor history, a meal shared collectively may preserve a solidarity. Therefore, kitchen becomes spaces where history is stored and always transmitted, being called a living archive. Material foundation, survival, not preference. Through this, we can say that many Dalit food practices emerge under conditions of necessity rather than luxury or unrestricted cultural choice. Historically, Dalit communities often faced limited land ownership, poverty, unstable labor conditions, environmental hardships, exclusions from agricultural wealth. Because of this, food systems developed around resilience and practicality. Millet became important because they required less water and survived in difficult times. They were not allowed to take water from all the commonwealths as because of the social binary of higher class and the lower class. Forage green roots, wild plants, and seasonal products supplemented their diets. Fermented and drying technique helped preserve food when resources were uncertain. They were not allowed to have the best quality vegetables, neither the good fruits nor the actual products available in the market. They had to eat what was presented to them in the aftermath of after whole purchasing of the upper class. What dominated some society often dismisses as a poor food was actually evidence of ecological knowledge, practical intelligence, and adaptation. These cuisines were cuisines of endurance. Hunger, nutrition, social inequalities could be understood in this part of the slide. Food inequalities eventually become bodily inequalities when households rely mostly on cereals because diverse foods are unaffordable or inaccessible. Nutrition suffers. Limited access to vegetables, fruit, pulses, dairy, and protein creates long-term health vulnerabilities. This often leads to malnutrition, anemia, poor dietary diversity, chronic weakness, generational health disadvantages. Therefore, caste oppression was not only symbolic, it also entered their bodies. When a society controls who eat well and who does not, inequality becomes physical reality in blood, bones, energy, and health. The politics of meat was an altogether different story. One of the clearest contradictions in caste food politics concerned meat consumption. Many Dalit communities historically consumed meat, including beef, because it was affordable and nutritionally valuable. Yet caste ideologies often stigmatize these food as impure. This created a paradox. Food that nourishes the body was socially condemned, survival choices become grounds for humiliation, and nutritional logic was overridden by the hierarchy. These food taboos were not merely dietary preferences, they often functioned as a tool of social control. By controlling what considered respectable to eat, caste society also regulated their dignity. Labor, gender, and the kitchen. This is another part of the whole discussion. Dalit food culture cannot be separated from labor, especially the woman labor. Cooking under economic constraints required collective fuel, managing water, stretching ingredients, preparing meals after wage labor, preserving food for future use. Dalit women often carried both external labor and domestic labor simultaneously. Cooking was also an intellectual labor. It required planning, improvisation, timing, nutrition management, decision making under scarcity. The kitchen, therefore, becomes not merely domestic space but a site of resilience, skill, and hidden expertise. Dalit women are not only subjugated from the upper class people, but rather they are subjugated in their own mainstream Dalit communities as well. They suffer double marginalization under both the people. Therefore, them, this labor and this survival was altogether a different perspective. So, while I work with cultural studies, and therefore applying some theories is always a part of my research work to understand why such and such thing exists. So, as a part of not being a scientific student, we don't get to do experiments and get to have the researches. Neither I'm a social science student, so that I can go into field and get the studies done. So, through these theoretical lenses of Pierre Bourdieu or Sara Ahmed, Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, we get to know the most aspects of what these people go through. Taste becomes an hierarchy. Pierre Bourdieu helps us understand that taste is socially conditioned. People often think taste is personal, but Bourdieu always argues that what societies call refined or vulgar frequently reflects social power. In caste society, upper caste foods were labeled pure and sophisticated. Dalit food were labeled coarse or inferior. Food linked with abundance gained prestige. Food linked with necessity lost status. This means food judgments were not neutral. They mirrored hierarchy. What counted as tasteful often depended on who possesses the power. As we can understand from Pira Bodu, then comes Sara Ahmed, who helps us understand food as an emotional archive. She helps us think about emotional attachment to the food. Food can carry memory in powerful ways. A smell or a taste may immediately evoke childhood hunger, affection, shame, struggle, or belonging. Dalit food often stores memories of scarcity, exclusion, labor, family care, community solidarity, resilience. Even where written history is silent, sensory memory remains active. A simple dish may contain generations of remembered struggle and love. Food as subaltern knowledge is what we know about Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak. Ask us to consider whose knowledge gets recognized. Dalit culinary knowledge is often oral, practical, embodied, collective, and adaptive. It may not appear in elite cookbooks or institutional record, but it remains highly sophisticated, knowing how to forage edible plants, preserve grains, cook with limited fuels, or feed large families with few ingredients requires expertise. The kitchen becomes a classroom, archive, and a site of knowledge production. Making the archive visible, we get to know that writing the invisible is what takes the most point of energy. When Dalit writers, scholars, and activists document food traditions, an important transformation take place. Documentation helps preserve neglected recipes, record community memory, challenge upper caste culinary narratives, claim authorship over one's own history, expand definitions of Indian cuisine. This is not only preservation, it is a political correction. Writing food history restores dignity to practice long, ignorant, or demeaned things. Digital archives and new visibility. Today, digital media has created new spaces for representation. Therefore, digital archives play a very important role in recording the unsaid things. Instagram, YouTube, podcast, online lectures, such like the one we are undergoing right now, allow Dalit food practices and histories to reach wider audiences. This creates greater visibility, democratizes storytelling, intergenerational exchange, community connections. However, there are also risks. Food can consume visually while in history of oppressed is ignored. Recipes may be aestheticized without context. Therefore, visibility alone is insufficient. Representation must also preserve historical depth. The archive as a political act. This side is crucial because it shifts the idea of archive from something passive to something active and interventionist. When we say the recording a recipe or narrative, food memory is not neutral, we are making a very important claim. Historically, Dalit communities were denied entry into system of knowledge production. They were not writing cookbooks, not curating culinary histories, and not represented in mainstream food discourses. So when a Dalit individuals could document a recipe today, it is not just preservation, it is reclamation. First, this act reclaims space. It brings Dalit food practices into cultural and intellectual domain that excluded them from centuries. It challenges who gets to speak about food and whose food is worth documenting. Second, it disrupts dominant narratives. Indian cuisines have long been framed through upper caste vegetarian traditions. When Dalit food enters the archive, it exposes the caste bias embedded in these narratives. It reveals that what has been presented as Indian food is actually selective and exclusionary. Third, it asserts cultural worth. Everyday practices such as cooking millets, foraging greens, or preserved food are often dismissed as survival techniques. But documenting them insists that these practices are worthy of scholarly attention and cultural recognition. Finally, it reshapes knowledge production. Dalit food archives are not passive records, they actively redefine what counts as heritage, knowledge, and cuisine. They challenge the authority of traditional archive and expand the boundaries of what is considered legitimate knowledge. So, the slides conclude with essentially argues that the archive itself becomes a site of resistance. The limits of the archive, it's a very important tension. While archiving is powerful, it is also an incomplete process. Even with the growth of written text and digital platform, a large part of Dalit food culture remains beyond documentation. This is not accidental. It is because these practices are deeply embedded in everyday life. So let us break this into the three aspects I have mentioned. First, oral and embodied transmission. Knowledge is not written down but carried in the body. Exists in gestures, repetitions, and practices. A person learns cooking not by reading a recipe but by watching, doing, and repeating it over a time. Secondly, ecological and localized knowledge. Food practices are shaped by region, climate, and environment. Foraging, seasonal cooking, and ingredient use vary widely. These knowledge cannot always be standardized or written because it depends on lived interaction with the environment. It shifts from one region to another. Third is collective and community practice. Cooking is often shared. Recipes are not owned by an individual but circulated within the communities. Measurements are not exact but experiential. These challenges modern idea of authorship and fixed instruction manual culture. The key takeaway here is that archives are always partial. They capture some aspect of the reality but leave others out as well. Dalit food culture exceeds the archive because it is living, dynamic, and constantly evolving. Invisibility and its state. This slide addresses why so much of the archive remains still unseen. The invisibility of Dalit food culture is not accidental, it is structural. Dalit communities have historically been excluded from literacy, publishing, academic institution, and cultural authority. Because of this, their knowledge was not recognized within the dominant system. This leads to three major consequences shown in the slide. First is the neglect. Dalit food practices are ignored or not considered important enough to record. Secondly, the misrepresentation. When these practices are represented, they are often framed through deficit narratives such as poverty or lack, rather than knowledge and resilience. Third is appropriation. Elements of Dalit food may be taken, aestheticized, and presented without knowledge their origins of history and struggle. Therefore, this slide pushes us to rethink fundamental questions. What counts as knowledge? Who is recognized as knowledge producer? What gets included in arc and what gets excluded? Thus, invisibility itself becomes a political condition that the archive must confront. Food as archive, practice, and resistance. This slide again brings everything together into conceptual framework. Dalit food culture is described here as a living archive that exists across multiple forms. It is not confined to a text or a digital media, but extends into embodied in everyday practices. Therefore, let us unpack the four key dimensions I have mentioned. First is survival. Food reflects material realities such as scarcity, labor, limited resource, and it shows how communities sustain life under constraint. Every ingredient and method tells a story of adaptation. Second is memory. Food carries sensory and emotional histories. Taste and smell preserve experience of hunger, care, exclusion, and belonging. These memories are stored in bodies, kitchens, not only in written records. Third is identity. Food encodes community and continuity. It reflects place, culture, and collective identity. Even when communities migrate, food adapts but continues to carry traces of the origin. Then comes the resistance. This is the most important dimension. To document, share, or even continue practicing Dalit food traditions is a political act. It challenges invisibility, rejects stigma, and asserts the presence. The This part can be concluded in a particular important manner that studying Dalit food is not just about understanding what people eat. It is about understanding how people endure, adapt, and resist within a deeply unequal social system. Despite books and digital media, much of Dalit food culture remains undocumented as it survives in village kitchens, household memories, seasonal routines, unwritten measurements, shared cooking habits, embodied repetitions. Therefore, this teaches us that not all archives are textual. Many communities preserve knowledge through practice rather than paper. The absence of written record does not mean absence of history. Food becomes endurance. Therefore, food reflects trauma and the resistance it has been through. Dalit Food Archive records trauma, but they also record the mainstream endurance approach to them. They show how communities survived exclusion, how women sustain household under scarcity, how memory preserves identity, how stigmatized food becomes source of pride, how cooking itself resists erasure. To continue cooking denied foods, reclaim forgotten recipes, or publicly document community, traditions can become an act of mere resistance. Food here does not remain silent, it speaks of both suffering and dignity. Therefore, to make my point more clear, I have been working with this particular two books that I'm going to discuss now. In here, we can read the book's name as Dalit Kitchen of Marathwada. It is written by Shahu Patole, one of a very famous books of Dalit cuisine undergoing in the market right now. How food becomes an archive to the text like Dalit Kitchen of Marathwada, unlike elite cookbooks that celebrate refinement and luxury. This work documents everyday Dalit food practices shaped by caste, labor, and ecology. The recipe in this text are not merely culinary instructions, they are historical records of how communities survived under structural exclusion. Ingredients such as jawar, bajra, dried vegetables, fermented grains, seasonal greens reveal the environmental realities of the Marathwada region, a drought-prone region where food systems were shaped by scarcity rather than the abundance. Cooking methods such as sun drying, grain preservation, foraging demonstrates inherited ecological intelligence. These practices tell us how people sustained life when access to resources was limited. The text also shows how caste determined food values. Food associated with Dalit communities were often stigmatized as coarse or inferior, even they were practical, nutritious, and sustainable, but still negated. Thus, the kitchen becomes a collective archive where generations stored knowledge through repetition, labor, and adaptation. Every recipe is recorded survival strategies, community memory, and resilience. This memoir-like documentation teaches us that Dalit food history often survives not in a state of record, but in cooking practices themselves. Another is a very well-known and said book, that is The Weave of My Life. If Dalit Kitchen of Marathwada gives us a collective archive, this one is basically a deeply personal and a sensory archive. In Urmila Pawar's autobiographical narrative, food appears through memory, hunger, and longing and emotional experience. Meals are remembered through leftover bhakris, diluted curries, whatever could be made from the limited means. Food is never described as luxury. It is described as effort, waiting, uncertainty, and the endurance. Taste and smell becomes carrier of memory. A simple meal can recall childhood deprivation, maternal care, or emotional way of poverty. Hunger in this memoir is not a passing incident. It is recurring structure that shapes childhood identity and social awareness. The figure of mother is central. Through cooking, stretching ingredients, and feeding the family, she transforms scarcity into the care. This reveals woman's invisible labor in sustaining Dalit households. Food in Pawar's memoir becomes an emotional archive because it preserves what a formal history ignores: bodily memory, everyday humiliation, family intimacy, and resilience. This text shows that trauma is often remembered through the stomach before it is written in history through books. Food, memoir, and the larger Dalit archive, where these two texts are read together, they help us understand how food becomes archive in multiple ways. Dalit Kitchen of Marathwada presents food as a collective archive of community practices, ecological adaptation, and caste survival, whereas The Weave of My Life present food as a personal archive of hunger, memory, gendered labor, and emotional life. Collective archive means when a group shares, group or a community shares completely same sort of ideologies or traditions. Therefore, we can say that this is a collective archive where the whole community is undergoing it. One of the very good example is community food traditions. Then comes the personal archive. Personal archive is something very individual, private or personal. It is inherited from one family means to generation. Basically, we can say family recipe diary. It can work as a personal archive. Together, they move across three levels. Food as material practices. What people ate was determined by access, labor, geography, and caste restriction. Second, food as memory. Taste, smell, and hunger preserves experiences long after the event passed. Food as resistance. To document these food today is to challenge dominant food history that erase the Dalit experience. These works also remind us that they represent only fragment of much larger unrecorded the archives from across India. Many Dalit food practices still survive orally in villages, home, and communities within the unwritten recognition. Therefore, to study Dalit memoirs through food is to recover histories of exclusion, dignity that official archives often neglected. So, to conclude, I'll say that Dalit food is not only about what was eaten, it is about how communities remembered suffering, transformed scarcity into knowledge, and carried history through everyday act of cooking. To conclude, Dalit food culture compels us to expand our understanding of both food history and archival practice. Food is not only nourishment, not merely cuisine, it is also memory, labor trauma, identity, and resistance. Through food, we witness how caste inequality shaped bodies, households, and everyday lives. Through the same food, we also witness creativity, endurance, and the refusal to disappear. The lecture has shown that the archives are not confined to libraries or written record. They also live in kitchen, in women's labor, in seasonal routines, in smells that recall childhood, in recipes remembered without measurements, in meals shared across generations. These are forms of knowledge and survived despite exclusion from the dominant institution. Texts such as Dalit Kitchen of Marathwada and The Weave of My Life remind us that food can preserve both collective history and intimate suffering. They teach us that hunger can be historical, taste can be political, and cooking can become an act of survival and assertion. Ultimately, to study Dalit food is to study how marginalized communities carried history in everyday life, transformed deprivation into resilience, and converted silence into testimony. Food therefore does not remain silent, it speaks of pain, memory, and dignity. Thank you.
Uh, uh, you I will uh, leave, uh, ideas with you on behalf of Success Odak Academy and this organizing team of this lecture series. Uh, so now the session is open for Q&A session or any discussion. So I request all the participants, if you have any questions, you can directly put these questions in chat box, or you can turn on your mic and directly ask your question to the speaker.
Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am, you
yeah,
are.
you are audible.
Yeah. So thank you, Miss Aishwarya, for this lovely lecture. I'm Meha. I'm also working in this area of Dalit food, and I got some new insights listening to your lecture. Just a few observation, or rather curiosity, if you can, term it. Uh, Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, yeah. So, whenever we use the term Dalit food, are we not, I mean, whenever we talk about Dalit food, this nomenclature, are we not trying to homogenize? Because like in India we have different types of cuisines. We have North India, South Indian, and within South Indian also we have so many variations. So I mean, when I talk about Dalit food, people do ask me, what is exactly Dalit food? Are we excluding some kind the regional variations? Because in North India Dalits prepare certain kind of food, and then we move to Maharashtra or South India, there are different variations. So is it okay to use this one term, Dalit food, and exclude the regional variations? This is my first observation. I mean, like a curiosity. And then, secondly, as I said that I also work in this area, and I do know a few people from Dalit community. When I ask about their food, they look puzzled, they look lost, and uh, they don't have anything to say when I want to know about their food, because I want to bring in the lived experiences in my research. So how to deal with this? Because they say that hum to wahi khate hain. I mean, whatever, everybody eats. So are we actually not somewhere, maybe due to urbanization, or I mean sanskritization, whatever zation you call it, are we not trying, I mean, is the Dalit food, who's going to archive these? We people are going to archive, na? But as you said that people are not practicing, we are not cooking at home, we are not talking about these things. So I mean, how to deal with this kind of situation? Because not everybody is into writing, na? And when we see the writing like Shahu Patole, and very few people have dared to, maybe Sharmila Rege or Patole and other such people, they have tried to document. But there are many, still, many cuisines specific to some Dalit communities, some regions that are, still not documented. So your take on that?
Uh, So, ma'am, the first thing that you questioned, the why we call it Dalit food. This is one thing that I have been questioning throughout the my research of past 2 years, because was like, why are we creating these binaries? Like, why are we differentiating these two type of food? It was done previously, and because of that, we have ended up in this discussion. Let's say, be very frank, this discussion wouldn't have existed if somebody would have stopped this long before. But
Right.
as the society has tried not to do anything for this thing and rather go with the flow, I personally feel that this word, Dalit food, itself creates a confusion and binary. So while I'm writing my thesis, I am the final stage of completing my thesis work. So this is, and the conclusion is what I have found, that this is the binary we have developed. It never existed because malice towards none. The reality of situation is right now we don't know what we are eating. The foods prepared by our cooks, our maids, we are eating something in hotels. The so-called, this is the speciality of the region. You should try. We don't know where
Mm-hmm.
this speciality come. I may know it for the region I come from, but I don't know for the region I'm going to. Right now I'm in
Right.
Chhattisgarh. Here we have something called basi bhat. Then
Mm-hmm.
it is very good for cooling your stomach in the heavy warm weathers. Like right now we have 40 to 43 degrees out. So we have this basi bhat. This bati bath used to be the food of Dalit people, the so-called Dalits of the community, the last infants or the babies of the food chain, who used to get the last amount of food, whatever was available to them. So now we are
Mm-hmm.
eating that food, calling it is probiotic, it is very healthy. We are drinking kanji.
Right.
Kanji once upon a time used to be drink for them. It was not a drink
Yes.
for us.
Yes.
So
Yes.
now the vegan culture has come. The vegans are saying the milk is not for us. So why were you not letting the Dalits drink that milk? That time it was a concept of purity. It was something that they were not supposed to have. That was a upper caste concept. So, ma'am,
Mm-hmm.
whenever we are going to talk about the mentality of the people, we are going to question these things. And only the researcher can distinguish and differentiate that this is a binary created by us to feel better about ourselves. It is
Right.
not for the society. Because the food is available to all, it was always about the control, the Foucault's power principle, who gets to eat what, and Bourdieu, as Bourdieu says, it is what the society decides. The it was very bad for what I have read in the Marathwada book. I have been to Marathwada region. The reality is quite different from what we see in the beautified society. And secondly, uh, I am not a person who officially calls this Dalit cuisine. I always call it Marathwada cuisine because that was a specialty of that region. Why
Right.
are we subjugating it by naming it a Dalit cuisine? So that is something we need to talk more about. And recording the this recording thing of this archive. It is again, ma'am, a question because something is very normal to me and that might be very abnormal to you. Like in Chhattisgarh, women don't wear blouses. That is what was a very inherent practices. I was born in 2000. So I have seen my mates wear a very tight sari covering their breast, but not wearing a blouse. And still
Mm-hmm.
there are certain parts of Chhattisgarh interior belt where people don't wear it. But
Mm-hmm.
now people have adapted in the region I live. They are wearing that fancy blouses and crop tops and jeans. Everything has come into the picture. But still there is that one part of the society which is not uprooting from their roots. And the people say, this is very normal. You will understand when the summer comes. And right now, I do understand why they don't wear blouses. The climate here is horrible. You can't survive with blouses. So, for something normal to them is something abnormal to us. And if we try to write their work, their story, we'll put our personal Orientalist approach in it. That is why let them write.
No, what I meant was that when Dalits have to write, I mean, it's not that the non-Dalits are writing. Even when the Dalits are writing, the present generation Dalits are writing, but unfortunately, they do not know anything because they are not used to that kind of food. They have
Yeah,
like
definitely. They have
up till
adapted. They have
adapted.
adapted a lot.
So
Like we all are eating momos and dim sums, which are not part of our everyday food. We might not be
right,
eating dal rice. So my future generation might be questioning what is dal rice. At this point, we
right,
need to question this.
because that
So
is why these kind of documentations become very important. Archiving food becomes very important, but unfortunately when our generation is into writing, we do not have any exposure of what we are supposed to write about.
definitely,
So
ma'am. We might even don't know our own cultures. I am a Gujarati staying in Chhattisgarh, so I have that mix identity. I eat all the spicy and sour palate of Chhattisgarh, which is quite something not acceptable in Gujarat, where the food is quite sweet. So
Right.
this is what we adapt to the region. So that's what we are talking about. It is all about ethnography. It is what about adaptability. Let them live and write their own story. They can take help from their grandmothers. There is something called a creature writing, a very
Yeah.
important part. So
Yeah.
this is was the reason a creature writing came into existence. They were not allowed to write. The African then, so in the movie Moana, we see all those tattoos in on her father's hands. That is what is a creature writing. When people are so desperate to keep their histories alive that they finally decide to write it on their own skins. That you can't peel my skin away, right? You can take everything from me. So right now, I think the generation is getting that we need to get back to our roots. I'm seeing so
Exactly.
much of things going on Sindhi culture. So much of again is going back to their roots and trying to negotiate what was the reality of their identity was. So I think we are somehow making a transition into the phase of rewriting the history. Therefore, the word historiography is coming into this existence quite every day.
Right, right, right. Thank you so much, Aishwarya. It was a wonderful presentation. Thank you, dear. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Greetings, ma'am, for the wonderful presentation. I am Aparna Srivastava from the University of Lucknow, and I'm currently pursuing master's.
Aparna, can you please increase your volume? Actually, we are not able to hear you properly.
Just a second, sir. Am I audible now?
Yeah, better.
Yeah.
Much better than earlier.
Yes. So I am Aparna Srivastava, and currently I'm pursuing masters. And for my dissertation, I have chosen the topic regarding how food acts as a marginalizing force in Dalit autobiographies. And for that, I have chosen two autobiographies: Om Prakash Valmiki's Juthan and Baby Kample's The Prisons We Broke. And with this lecture, I got a lot of insights on how I can enhance my dissertation. So I'd like to ask ma'am on anything, that any insight that she wants to add, which I can add up to my dissertation. Also about what theoretical framework should I go with. Currently I am using Annihilation of Caste by Dr. Ambedkar, and an essay Deciphering a Meal by Mary Douglas. Thank you.
Uh, So, Aparna, it was very nice hearing that somebody is again doing something on food, because at some point I have started feeling that there is a very small community of people who is still interested in working something on food and literature. So I hope you get your dissertation done beautifully. So these both books are the pioneering books of food and subjugation studies. So we study Jutan in our bachelor's degree. We read a very excerpt of it. When I was doing my bachelor's, I've read that book. Same goes for the another one. The annihilation of caste is one of the very good theories that you are going to take. Plus, please do incorporate Spivak, Dipesh Chakrabarti. Then there is Krishnendu Ray. Then there is again, as I have used Sara Ahmed. If you are talking about trauma, then use Kathy Karuth. She is one of the fundamental writers in this field. Then there is Pire Bordu, he talks about food. So these are the basic theorists that you need to keep in mind while you are discussing food studies. You can't just remove them and start writing, because Arjun Appadurai started the word gastropolitics, and there is Tulsi Srinivasan who gave the word gastronostalgia. So try to incorporate all these things to make your work more resounding. There are many things also available on research, but do add these.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your insights. I really be very happy
Aparna,
if I
how
can
are
work
your
with you.
questions? Yeah, I think Aparna, your question is very personal. It needs the means first you need to discuss the context on which or in which you are weaving your narrative. Because food studies is a very vast phenomenon, very vast ocean. Now you need to decide what angle you are going to explore. your aspect, the aspect related to your study. You're basically talking about food study, the food culture of the Dalit mentioned in Jyotin and other maybe Kamle's work. But the question is which angle you are going to focus upon. That is more important. And accordingly, you choose to you select your theory, as Mehta said. Yeah, please go ahead. Uh,
Sir, may I speak?
yeah, please.
So, actually, the angle that I wanted to explore with my dissertation is how food and emotions are connected, and how the emotions of the Dalit people is very much interconnected with the food they eat and the food that is being presented to them. So, the emotional aspect was something that I was trying to put forward through my dissertation, and these two works, in which if we take Valmiki and Baby Kamble, there are both feminine and masculine aspects. So that too was something that I wanted to capture.
Yeah, very nice, very nice. It's good topic. You please go ahead. However, as Surya Mehta spoke, this up.
So, Aparna, I might add that after you have clarified, do try to add Foucault's theory of power disciplines body in everyday life, because it talks about food taboos, caste control, who can cook and eat with whom. And there is another theorist, you might have read Judith Butler. She talks about bodies are socially regulated and made vulnerable inequally. So she talks about hunger, body representation, and denied nourishment. So these are very important for your research work. And Jan Asman, Mariana Hirsch, all these people will help you to create a better structure for your thesis work.
Thank you, ma'am.
So, Aishwarya Mehta ji, there are some questions on the chat board. Can you read and then answer them one by one, or shall I read it for your convenience as you decide?
So, may I able to ask a
Yeah,
question?
yeah, please go
Yes.
ahead.
As we know that according to Ambedkar, he always promoted like casteless society, and he wanted.
Your voice is a bit cracking, dear.
As said by the concerned speaker. So if you say Dalil that we exist, it is needed. But if you want to upgrade, fine. If a Dalit visits a foreign country, subject to like intelligence or subject to like getting scholarship from international country, don't you think that person will adapt to that environment? Because it may be
Uh,
that Dalit may go to an European country, or that Dalit may go to Oriental countries such as China, or maybe North Korea, South Korea, or what you say. So would that person be called as a Dalit in that country?
sir, to start this answer, I would say that anybody going from any place, they don't belong. They try to imitate the people they are with. So, imitation is something that we all have done, the diaspora, the mimicry part. So, if somebody is a Dalit and he migrates to China, Russia, Mauritius, anywhere in the world, but even if they try to incorporate with them, they are just mimicking them. They can't lose their roots. This is what happened with the diaspora theory. When we talk about diaspora, we talk about how they try to assimilate, then they became mixed like a salad bowl, but they couldn't become a one. So they should rather avoid mimicry, and they should rather take contingence to their own identity. We all are trying to mix ourselves with something else. Even if I go to US or UK, I'll try to be like them, to get assimilate well, and to just forget my roots and to create a new identity of myself. But the reality is, we are what we eat, what we are born with. We can't just change our skin and decide that I want to be this. So it's a something of a intellect on of a conscious decision that these people make.
Okay, fine. If you consider that Dalit, I consider that Dalit male or female, anyone, any gender. If that Dalit male or female, that's inter-country means inter-country marriage, different country marriage. That progeny will be of that nationality. Then there would be the variations, right? It won't remain the
Definitely,
same.
there would be. Yeah, there would be the definition. Obviously, there would be a variation, sir. It's all over the world that the father's lineage would be followed. So there might be a shift in their category status, and they might become a general category in India and a normal person in other space. But this is what we all are questioning, I suppose, that why are we creating all these binaries? Let people live. We are now out of, we all are intellectual people, we all are academicians. We know what happened after creating all these binaries. Why are we again trying to condemn to these same things again and again?
So if there are no questions, will
There are
go
some
for.
questions in the chat box.
Okay.
There is, I suppose, a question from Samita Sarkar. When the community is not identified as a part of social mechanism, how can you expect their lifestyles, which include food culture, to be recognized? Uh, so uh, this is something again we have discussed again again. It is difficult to expect recognition when a community itself has historically been excluded from a social structure. If people are denied visibility or a dignity or representation, their food culture would definitely remain unseen. The absence of recognition does not mean absence of culture. It reflects unequal system of power and documentation, if we think of it in that manner.
Yes.
Then there is another question from Neha Arora. Why is it that new generation Dalits are not writing much on food, whereas the earlier generation incorporated food discourse? Well, we discussed it, but I still may answer that it may not be accurate to say that new generation is not writing on food. Rather, the mode has changed. One thing that I would like to add, they rather than writing, they are documenting it in their blogs or their online lectures or their small podcast and everything. So food may still be present, but within some broader themes of aspiration. So it is a less of a disappearance of food writing and more in a shift of form and emphasis. I don't find any other question. Is there any other questions?
There is no question left, I think. Any other question from audience here, or shall we proceed ahead?
Anand,
Yes, sir.
Anand,
Yes, sir,
am
I
I
am
audible?
hearing you properly. Yeah, yeah, you are audible, sir.
Okay, okay. Uh, I I just respond came in.
Sir, your network
There are
connectivity is bit lagging.
is it okay now?
Yeah, better
Hello.
than. Yeah,
Yeah.
you please go ahead.
So I want to just respond to the points that came in the discussion. Neha Arora was raising a question that when there are regional variations, regional entities that Dalits undergo, how can we homogenize? Uh, it's not the homogenization, but every region this carries a unique experience in relation with the food. While there are modern changes when they come to the market, they go to the space, it's not that always they undergo the different experience, but there are certain occasions where the social structure is such they undergo certain experiences. In cities, for example, remember 2 years back or 3 years back in Pune, one Dalit lady was Dalit maid, Dalit woman maid uh, was cooking in an upper caste woman house, and upper caste woman realized that she's a Dalit woman. She filed a case in police station. In Pune, in the modern metropolitan cities, this Dalit woman working as a maid, cooking in the upper caste house, undergoes a different experience. One may say that it's a modern city, who cares? But there are people are very particular about it. If you go to the room rent in modern cities, Hyderabad, Bangalore, wherever, the owners of the house definitely ask about food habits. In the modern cities, the modernity is somehow not able to overcome those social structures. Precisely, caste is very, very important structure. So while modernity, education, technology creates opportunities for the Dalits to enter into different field market to the access, but still they undergo certain unique experiences, which is not the case with the upper caste or other groups. So therefore, their experience with the food in relation to food become very, very important. It's not that there are regional variations, definitely. There are also intercaste dynamics within the Dalits. Take Musahar case in North India and in Tamil Nadu and other places. It's not that uh, uh, every Dalit community eats the same food. No. But how upper caste look at them, their body, their knowledge on the cooking, the hierarchization of food is it's a different. So therefore, taking the intercaste dynamics within the Dalits who are historically uh, cons- uh, undergo certain unique experiences. If you book itself, uh, he documents community experiences. He's is also trying to see the intercaste, intercommunities within the Dalits dynamics in relation with the food. Uh, the second point is Aishwarya Mehta was making a point that we are creating a binaries. Of course, binaries are there, but who is creating? What is the purpose of creating it? How this binary created by some people serve and reproduce that hegemony. So that's we have to understand. Uh, who creates a guess if you go to the city, pure vegetarian, pure ghee, you will come across this no, signboards, pure ghee, pure vegetarian. And in universities and other places, only vegetarians are allowed, because in public domain, in modern spaces, this hierarchy of food is in a visible and invisible way circulates, and there is a tendency of normalizing it. You don't find it as a problem. This normalization is very deep into caste structure. That's where the Dalit experience, understanding Dalit experience become very important. So if we do not pay to this attention, I mean, these things, I think our we will miss the very nuances how
True.
Dalits undergo the because for example in Telangana you will find a daba with a title Reddy Daba. Reddy is a upper caste dominant
Yeah.
powerful community, but you will not find the same title. Can you find in North India Chama Baba? No,
No.
impossible. Why
No. No.
is
No.
that? How, if market allows everybody, why is that there is no space to keep this Chama or Pasi Daba?
Right.
We have to understand how this market economy, the public sphere that we uh, uh, think that is modern, is somehow in an invisible, visible form normalize the hierarchies.
True. True. True.
We have to understand those structures. I stop it here and thank you,
Thank
Aishwarya. Your presentation is very systematic, and the how the archiving the test, you made a very clear point. Uh, thank you very
thank you, sir.
much.
Uh,
Thank
uh,
you.
Thank you, Professor Gopani ji, for your critical elaborations. And, through your mediation, I hope that every point, the very nuanced analysis of this presentation is more crystallized. Now, the question of Neha Arora is, I think, answered very well. So I really thank you,
Thank you,
Professor
sir. Thank you
Gopani,
so much.
and
Thank
Sorry, Mehta. So with this note, I have a very small question. While talking about the archiving of Dalit food memory, especially in modern spaces or modern time, there are some challenges because, as you mentioned, that there are some binaries we have created. So, as Gopani sir has elaborated, is it we that we have created this binary, or there is somebody else or some other communities else who is creating or imposing certain kind of binaries upon us, and we have to defend that back. So, extending that, I have a question. What particular method do you use in your research while archiving Dalit food memories with a special reference to the famine experience of the Dalit? If you have
Uh,
any particular, yeah, please.
so the thing is, sir, my research work is about the already done archive. I'm not the one who is archiving this, but I am definitely working with few of the people who are doing this work. There is a Oral History Association of India who are working in this field for a very long time, who are documenting many of the Indian heritageal projects, right? Not necessarily the food, but they are working on so many others. I work with Goya project, then there are many others. So what my part of the research is that Dalit food in modern times is shaped by the historical binaries, sir. We are not creating these caste binaries right now. These are something that we have inherited in our brains since we were born. It is way beyond our parents were born, our grandparents were born. It's like 100 years back. We are living in 21st century, but our this particular societal mindset is still 100 years before this whole facade
Mm,
started. So right now we can't just remove it entirely from the system, but what we can do is we can now try to assimilate with them. Already we are doing that in institutions. We are not calling somebody a Dalit, which was quite prevalent. If we go 50 years back, they were not supposed to sit in the classrooms with upper class students. They used to sit in the floors or outside the classrooms. They don't used to drink water from the same water cooler or what earthen pots that were kept for water. So now we have already passed on a very major part. But this thing is still prevalent because there are certain people in the society who are taking advantage of this binary. Neither the people who are in the binary want to live in this binary, neither the people who don't believe in this binary want to live in this. But there is a certain spectrum of people who are minting advantages from this particular section. We can call it political, we can call it a rigid mindset, but it is something that is still preventing us from breaking these shackles.
yeah. Exactly. You are very right in your take. So thank you. With this note, I think you have presented a very critical insight related to your research. Very nuanced analysis you have put forward. And definitely this presentation of yours will be helpful for the other scholars who are working on this field. So with this note, I invite Mr. Devasis to propose a vote of thanks to the speaker. Devasis, the floor is yours now. Devashish, are you there?
Am I audible, Anand?
There is sound echo from your side, Professor Gopani ji.
Okay.
So I guess
Okay.
there's some technical. Yeah, please go ahead, sir.
Thank you, everyone, particularly Aishwarya Mehta, for very systematically presenting her work. And hopefully, she will submit her thesis soon. And we will continue to have this dialogue on Dalit food culture series organized by Shodhak Academics. We also had a Facebook Live. People are watching on Facebook Live. And we are recording this lecture and we will upload the lecture to you. Uh, those who are interested, they can check the Academics YouTube channel. Soon we are also going to come up with the other two lectures on this special series. So with this, on behalf of Satyashodak Academics, we thank everyone who ever participated in this session. And we thank Anand, Devesh, and everybody. Uh,
So, thank you everyone for taking some time from your busy schedule. I know it's a very busy schedule for all the participants here. So it's really great honor for us to have this serious engagement. So I really congratulate all of you, and especially I congratulate Aishwarya Mehta for her research, and definitely her thesis is going to serve greater purpose and this field, and it will be really helpful for other scholars and those who are working in this area. So thank you all for this. Thank you,
Thank you,
Mehta.
everyone.
With,
Thank you so much, sir.
yeah. So okay, then you can take leave now. So thank you all.